Well, the journey southbound continues tomorrow. I'm leaving at dawn from the Isle of Man, which is right up here, and heading down on an 80-mile passage to Dublin in Ireland. So pretty straightforward navigation, not much problem there. There's a little TSS activity right as you arrive at Dublin, but I'll navigate that without any problem. And the wind, for a change, now I'm looking at in the range of 20 to 24 knots all the way down. I hope it'll ease up a bit as I arrive. Good morning, underway today at 6 o'clock this morning, leaving the Isle of Man in the rain and 23 knots of wind, but I'm headed in a deep broad reach, almost 150 degrees, and I've got, just by precaution, I set the second reef in the main when I left, but as soon as I catch my breath, I think I'm going to shake that one out and just leave it at the first reef. We're flying along here, 6 knots, that's fine. 23 knots of wind, no need to take chances or risks, so I'll leave one reef in. But next stop, Dunleary, Ireland. Running downwind in 25 knots, apparent at, well, between 6.5 and 8.5 knots. So flying on just the Jenny. Look at that, just a partially furled Jenny. This is more 28 gusting to 34. This is where that debate is a bit on. My boat has a fin keel and a spade rudder, and some of the older, more traditional boats have a long keel, and the rudder is embedded in the keel, and those are probably a bit more stable, frankly, in these conditions. Less tendency to round up, and just a little more stable platform. Yeah, the trade-off is that they're a little more difficult to maneuver in marinas and places like that. A lot more difficult, actually. But those are one of the trade-offs that you need to consider. Where are you going to do most of your sailing, and in what conditions? These are certainly not Saturday afternoon fun sail in the local marina. But it's not uncomfortable, and it's certainly not dangerous. And, it's just I'm not working on my suntan while I'm out here today. Well, this may not be the most comfortable ride I've ever had, but look at the performance we're getting. Speed over ground. This is the arrival at Dunleary, which is over there, in 25 knots of wind. Else to go, so maybe it'll be a bit more protected when I get closer. What an arrival! What an arrival the Irish have reserved for me. motoring out of the channel to Dublin at 4 o'clock in the morning, pouring rain. Farewell, Dublin. Well, I got underway several hours ago from Dunleary, which is one of Dublin's ports. Very nice port, a little bit expensive, but very, very nice marina. Difficult passage today. I'm going to Felly in North Wales, and this passage kind of reminds me, it's the nautical corollary to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can have either the tide exactly as you want it, or you can have the wind exactly as you want it, but you can't have both of them, at least not on this passage. It's actually going to be quite close. It's an 85-mile passage. It's going to be quite close as to whether I make it or not, because I'm currently running against tide, wind over tide actually, so it's a little choppy and bumpy, and so the timing is quite critical. And if I don't make it, there aren't a whole lot of choices for Plan B and Plan C, because there's some difficult tidal races around Pwllheli. So anyway, well, this passage that it's not all that easy from a planning point of view. There's really difficult tides, and the winds had to be right, or I wasn't going to make it. There's a narrow window in Wales for me to enter that port, so I was a bit nervous, but the wind has come in very nicely, and now I'm doing 7 knots on 16 knots apparent, 7.5 knots, 7.7, so that's great. I'm quite a bit relieved now. I still have 60 miles to go, but that sure makes Plan A look a lot more feasible now than earlier. So, and I've got 1 knot in 1 reef in the mainsail, and I've got the big Genoa out, but very partially furled, just to keep things under control. The wind has been quite erratic, so I want to make sure that I don't get overpowered here. So managing things conservatively, which is probably a good thing to do if you're a cruising sailor. Always manage conservatively. Welcome to Wales. That point is called Bardsey Point. It's actually an island, and I could have saved a few miles if I had gone through the gap between the islands, but the current runs at 6 knots, and I didn't quite get the tide right because the wind was a little better than forecasted. So I think I'll stay outside of the 6 knot current. I'm supposed to cross a couple of sandbanks here called Devil's Tail and Devil's something or other, that they say have some overfalls on them, but it's not too bad. The weather today, the wind has died down a little bit, so I'm going to go straight across one. I'll film it if there's anything notable about it. There are some overfalls there. They're very small. You can imagine though, on a stormy day with wind over tide, those things can build quickly up to 2 meters in height, and they bounce around in every which direction. But today, no factor. Not for Isabel. Entrance to Pwllheli.
You want some fuel?
Yeah.
You can't serve it, sorry. You can do fuel. Do it now. You can do it now, yeah. It's fine. That's what I'm doing. I like it. Yeah. Okay.
Tough day today. I'm beating to windward in 20 knots of wind, but my staysail is allowing me to do okay. 5.5 knots close haul. It'll be a long day. No retreat, no surrender. Press on. Beating to windward in short period waves. Not much fun. I'm just clearing the sandbar that allows me now to turn into Aberystwyth. That is called Patches, the name of the sandbar. I want to show you the track that I did earlier. The wind was from about here, this direction. So I had to tack to avoid this big shoal here. I had to tack this way, and then I reversed the tack, and then I did the tack this way. And those are legs of about almost 10 nautical miles, and then, you know, I got this one right all the way down to, I had to come around another shoal to get into the harbor. So the question is, do you do long legs for your tacks, or do you do a whole bunch of short ones? And you know, my thinking was the wind wasn't going to change at all. I had the 48-hour forecast. For 48 hours the wind was going to stay the same direction. So I figured that why not do long legs, make it easy for myself in tacking. Now if I had thought the wind was going to fade in the afternoon or change direction or something like that, then I think there's an advantage to doing instead of a real long leg like that, 10 or 11 miles, to do tacking back and forth like this all the way down, and that way you don't get caught out. So I'd be interested in hearing, those of you with experience at this, how do you develop your strategy? What do you do? When do you do long legs and when do you do short legs on tacking? The entrance to Aberystwyth Marina in Wales, home of a major university. The entrance to Fishguard Marina. If I want Châteauneuf-du-Pape tonight, I'm going to have to row for it. Well, I'm transiting a Welsh tidal gate called Jack Sound. Jack Sound. And there's another one, another 6 or 7 miles ahead. Current goes ripping through here at 6 knots. Again, need to get your timing right. And there's some hazards here. Can't see them very well on the camera, I'm sure, but there's a wall of rocks that stick out called the bitches. So you need to avoid the bitches here and elsewhere. You can see the current there. You think a sailboat could go against that? The pilot book says 6 to 8 knots. Obviously I'm going with the current. This tidal gate up ahead is called Jack Sound. The previous one was Ramsey Sound. They're just a few miles apart. I've got full sails out, but when I go through a tidal race like this where the current will be 6 to 8 knots, I also put on the engine. You can see it's only a couple hundred meters wide there, maybe even not that, with hazards on both sides. So I put the engine on just as a security, keep it ticking over at an intermediate setting. So we're doing 9.5 knots. This entrance to Milford Haven, which is a very busy petroleum products port in Wales, reminds me of Felixstowe, because it got a couple of channels, on a long channel, a lot of shipping. There's some shipping coming out right now with a pilot in front of him. And when I went to Felixstowe, I dropped my sails very early, and then I ended up motoring in about, I don't know how many miles, but it was a heck of a long way. But I'm going to do the same thing here, because your first time in a place, you don't know, can you keep your sails up or not? See ships coming out. So first time here, I'm going to drop the sail and just motor in. The port controller just called me to say to stay out of the way of this guy who's coming out. Of course, I had to run down and answer the radio. And I've got some fishing buoys here right in the way. Pier Head, Pier Head, Pier Head. This is sailing vessel Isabel. So I've got to tie up while right up here, and then they'll open up the lock and I'll get in there. Isabel's first pass through a lock. And the door to freedom opens. Clearing the lock.
Hi there, what can I get for
Hello.
you?
Can I have a grande châteauneuf de tack?
You're at Starbucks.